The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a plea which is against Air India's hiring rules as far as transgenders go. A transgender petitioner has been allowed to challenge Air India's hiring rules such as the group discussion stage, the personality screening test for cabin crew jobs. As per the current norms, it permits a candidate to appear for this either being a male, a man or a woman and not as transgender. This has now been challenged in the Supreme Court. We have with us our Deputy News Editor Meenakshi Bhanja getting us further inputs. Meenakshi, please go ahead. This, of course, with respect to a transgender having suffered in not being hired by Air India because of this very provision which was not there on their forms.
Well, absolutely, Seher, in this stage where the Supreme Court is leading the way in India pertaining to a lot of reforms, be that the Sabrimala issue, the 377 issue, even the adultery law, which the court will be examining very shortly. This is another petition that will perhaps go on to assume import in coming days because, like you correctly referred to, the current hiring policy of Air India does not have any segregation segment or place for a transgender. And therefore, this petition has been filed in the Supreme Court, which just moments back has got admitted. And this is by a transgender who applied for a job but was obviously declined by Air India because the current policy or the norms that are in place only make a way for a male or a female insofar as their interview format of group discussion and personality screening test go. The transgender in this particular instance was interested in applying for a cabin crew post and of course has been turned down and has sought the Supreme Court's intervention for a revisit or a relook on these guidelines.
All right, Meenakshi, this also keeping in mind that she's been battling it out with Air India for the past several months on the grounds of explanation that Air India had given that we have no such provision, despite the government also making it very clear that this needs to be taken into account for all jobs across the board.
Well, absolutely. You know, Seher, these are interesting times. There have been large-scale overhauls of status quos as they exist. We have seen the Supreme Court's intervention and leading the way in many such instances. Of course, tomorrow onwards, again, the debate pertaining to the entry of women in the Sabrimala temple will commence in the apex court. And this particular instance, why it is important is just because something has continued for a period of time is no reason for it to keep continuing with evolution of time and new principles that have come into play. That is what is at the core of the Supreme Court going ahead and admitting this petition because the transgender in this particular instance has long struggled for reform or has sought justice for their own selves, and it has been declined. And the very fact that the Supreme Court will now be putting this particular policy under its own scanner and judicial scrutiny speaks volumes because we will hear more articulated positions going forward from even the central government, including Air India itself, on why such a policy, which has continued as status quo thus far, cannot be amended, Seher.
Exactly. Meenakshi, many thanks. Many thanks for getting us those details.